Comic book professionals Larry Hama and Mark Waid have taken to Facebook to accuse Dan DiDio of blacklisting them from DC Comics. Waid takes it even a step further, claiming that not only is he blacklisted, but half a dozen other artists have been blacklisted as well by Dan DiDio, and that DiDio actually lied to his face, claiming that he actually never did indeed blacklist him, but then he claims that he was still blacklisted, even though DiDio said he wasn't. But let's get into this here. Hama and Waid's comments come in reaction to DC artist Jamal Igle announcing he was ending his personal and business relationships with DiDio due to the former DC publisher doing an interview promoting his Ancient Enemies comic book series with John Del Rosa. If you want to watch that interview, you can find it here on YouTube after this video, and then you could also find it on the website as well in this article. Igle reacted to the interview, writing on Facebook, "I just unfriended an ex-employer for crossing a line they can never come back from. Once you cross that Comicsgate line, we're done professionally and personally." Interestingly, Igle has now privated his Facebook. You can no longer see this post publicly. He's made a number of his posts private. There are still some that are public, but this post and a number of others have now been privated, so you can't see those unless you are friends with him or approved follower. In the comments of the post, Hama accused DiDio of blacklisting him, writing, "He blacklisted me at the same time I was blacklisted at Marvel. I didn't work for like 8 years. He asked me to take on a title that I thought should be written by a woman and told him so. He did the same thing to Priest." So this isn't new from Larry Hama. He previously claimed in May that he'd been blacklisted by both Marvel and DC. This is what he wrote on Facebook. He says, "I was considered a commercial hack by organized comic fandom for my entire Marvel run of G.I. Joe. I was considered not good enough to write for the G.I. Joe animated shows. My Wolverine run was mostly ignored by fanzines while it was running, never got invited to cons. I was considered not good enough to teach comics at SVA. I was blacklisted by both Marvel and DC. The list goes on and on. I learned very early to ignore the negativity and Charlie Mike with my best efforts." When asked why he got blacklisted or how did you get blacklisted and for how long, he said, "I made the mistake of telling one head honcho that his brilliant online fumetti could not be shot for his allotted budget and that there wasn't enough bandwidth in the universe at the time to put it up. There wasn't. The result was that he fired the entire online department and none of his editors returned my calls for years. The other head honcho is pissed that I turned down a job offer because I thought the project would have been written by a woman." It seems pretty clear that that second head honcho is indeed Dan DiDio, given that is now what he's saying Dan DiDio did to him to blacklist him. But despite being blacklisted, this is what he said. He says, "I have no grudge against Marvel or DC. They are corporate entities. I was done dirty by execs who are no longer at either company. I harbor no enmity towards the editors, artists, and writers who stabbed me in the back, conspired to have me fired off books so they could write themselves, took credit for my work, etc., etc. As my old compadre Howard Chaykin stated, my revenge is living well, having a loving family, wonderful friends, and loyal fans." I'm going to call that into question, given the fact that you seem to be still extremely bitter about this alleged blacklisting by Dan DiDio, that you're going on to Jamal Igle's Facebook and whining about it. So I just don't believe you. I definitely think you're still bitter about that. As for Waid, he responded to Hama's comments on Igle's post, writing, he wrote this, "And Devin Grayson and Alan Grant and me and a half a dozen other artists." He had a long list. Later on in the thread, he said, also Mike Waringo, go figure. And then later he still said, "Did I mention Humberto Ramos?" Interestingly enough, B. Clay Moore would then chime in. B. Clay Moore, if you're unfamiliar with him, he led a campaign against myself and Bounding Into Comics to try and get us banned by DC, Marvel, and other publishers from their press lists. He commented in response to Hama's post, writing, "Larry Hama, I know people he blacklisted who asked him to his face about it, at which point he lied to them about it not being true. That's doubling down on crappy behavior." This is when Waid kind of gives his anecdote and makes his accusation that DiDio lied to his face. He said, "True. At least once he actually came up to me and told me that he'd heard I thought I was blacklisted and it wasn't true." So Didio's going up, hearing about these rumors, goes up to Waid and said, "Hey man, you're not blacklisted." And then Waid says, "I called the editors at DC and they said the opposite. We were told in no uncertain terms to never hire you." Interestingly enough, DiDio did just do an interview with Mark Millar earlier this year promoting Ancient Enemies as well, where he said that he actually had to go around DC editors because they had their own kind of way of doing things, and he had to like work around them in order to get things done because they were being roadblocks, and you had to like kind of work the corporate structure, and you couldn't just go in and kind of clean house. So he actually had to work around them and go straight to the talent to figure that out. Maybe Waid was still trying to play the old game where you had to go through the editors, and then the editors were indeed the ones who had the blacklist, and it might not have been Dan DiDio. But whether or not that's true, we'll have to probably ask Dan and figure that out, get some more information from him. And at the end of the day, God knows the truth. So whoever is lying, it will be known at the end of the day. But I also wanted to go into this too because it's just really ironic that Mark Waid is talking about blacklists when he indeed has actually advocated them and has taken credit for them. He's actually admitted to it. So this is what he said back in like 2018 when your boy Zach was trying to publish his Jawbreakers book, his first one with Antarctic Press. Basically, Waid showed up at a convention, I think, in Texas somewhere. I'm not really sure where it was at, but he shows up at a convention and he said this: "I'm trying to say without inflaming anything. Recently, one of these groups kickstarted a comic, great, awesome. They're going to do their own graphic novel because they are hyper-conservative guys. And the rap was that comics is not interested in conservative creators or that we're throwing conservative creators out. That's not the case at all. There are a lot of conservative creators in comics. We're throwing a-holes out. That's what we're doing. And for every creative a-hole we don't like in comics, there's 10 liberal a-holes we don't work with in comics. There's no political yardstick here." So he's obviously trying to deny this whole political persecution thing, which I think is just absolutely bogus. I think there's so much evidence to prove that that is indeed not true, that there is clearly political persecution happening within the comic book industry. But while he's trying to deny that, he does indeed admit that he is blacklisting people and throwing them out. So funny that he's whining about being potentially blacklisted by Dan DiDio when he has actually admitted to creating blacklists himself for people he doesn't like. I guess that's just kind of how it works, right? The fruits of his labor have come calling, and he is now paying for what he has done. But what do you guys think about Larry Hama and Mark Waid whining about being allegedly blacklisted by Dan DiDio, especially Mark Waid, when he actually has admitted here a couple years ago that he actually was working to blacklist people and had indeed blacklisted people himself from the comic book industry.
Subscribe for more.